Hey, Star Wars fans and Rule the Galaxy fans. Um, it's Joe in the pilot seat, and we're gonna break away from the regular crew because life's just going by too fast and there's too many things going on. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you're probably going to see that I have nothing behind me because Big Joe is moving out of the current Rule the Galaxy studio into a new one here in just a few days. So, with that being said, we are taking a break. We're having some fun. We're going to do one of the best shows you've ever heard because it's got two of the best guests we've ever had. And you can see them on YouTube. You'll hear them here on a second on the podcast. You know where to track us down, though, in between times. Rule the Galaxy. Just look for us on all the social media platforms and just go listen to us because we're fun and you should. So, but enough about me. Two of my favorite guys in the world who actually helped me get started on Rule the Galaxy are here as guests today. The first one knew he was going to be a guest. The second one just found out he was going to be a guest. So we have Mr. Scott Ryfun, the most listened to man in South Georgia radio, and the host of Geek Out Loud and so many other things I'm sure that I'm forgetting, Mr. Steve Glosson. We'll start with Scott because he knew he already knew he was coming on and wasn't a surprise. Scott, long time no talk to. How you doing?
I was told there would be Mark Newbold here, and instead we get Glosson. I don't really know that that's fair.
And I can't even do a good British accent. So
what's never stopped you before?
It's a rebellion, isn't it?
Governor,
it's a rebellion, isn't it?
Lisa, can I have more? Yeah, I don't know how to do British accent either, but hey,
and here was the thing. You suggested that we talk and it would be Mark Newbold and me and we talk Marvel, Star Wars and stuff. And I had a triangle story of you, Mark Newbold, and me that I was going to reveal here. Should I go ahead and reveal it anyway?
I think you should. You've teased the crowd. Yes.
Okay. It's actually not about you, but I just did that to get you hooked in. Newbold, I knew Newbold was a big lover of the Marvel Star Wars. And at one point, I reached out to him because I know that in America, we actually have more access to American comics than in Britain. So I reached out to him one time and I found out,
Wait a minute. Hold on.
Huh? Why?
You're telling me that we have more access in America to American comics?
I know it's shocking. I know.
Makes no sense.
I know. It's that darn pound system. But so at one point I reached out to him to find out what issues he was missing from his original run, because when I did him on my Star Wars story, we had a little bit of talk about that, and I knew I was going on a trip where I'd be buying some comics, and I thought, well, I'll keep an eye out for the things he's missing. Turns out I found almost everything he was missing in a comic shop in Indianapolis on my trip. So there's actually the Joe connection. And then when I got back, and here's something weird, when I got back, I realized there's one that I hadn't gotten, but I got him everything he needed except one book. And then I shipped it to him. But guess where he was when I shipped it to him?
In the United States.
He was at Disney. So I shipped it to his resort at Disney and he picked it up there. So
nice.
Yeah. But just kind of a weird coincidence that the Indianapolis guy would have us on. And that's where I got most of his collection from, or not most of his collection, but most of what I got him for his collection.
That is a very cool connection right there. I like that. And I'm surprised that Indianapolis would have what he was looking for, but we've got some all right comic book stores here.
You did okay.
Yeah. Well, originally, yes, I was going through all my checks and balances and saying, hey, I'm going to have some free time. Who should I have on? So I'm going to reach out to people. And it just so happened, I was like, two guys who talk about the Marvel Star Wars comic books, we should put this together and just let them go. And then I was sitting there and Steve had said, hey, I might need this week not to be on, but maybe next week, something like that. And then I was listening to his most recent Geek Out Loud, and here he was talking about comic books. And I thought, we're already going to be talking about comic books. Yes, it's Hulk, and yes, it's the Thing, but it's still comic books. We can still bring that up with Mr. Ryfun. So, and I like that you brought my dogs into your Geek Out Loud, by the way, Steve. Thank you for doing that.
Your dogs hate you.
What?
Well, they don't hate you, but they see you as a source of food and shelter, nothing more. They don't experience true effect. They would take you over in a heartbeat if they could. And most of the time they think they have. I mean, you follow them around to watch them use the bathroom. You're constantly feeding them, and you're just so happy to see them when you come home. It's they think, wow, I must be a god.
They're like C-3PO with the Ewoks. Yes.
I feel like you're talking about cats though, and not dogs.
Well, now cats look at you and say, I am a god.
Cats, yeah. Cats look at you and go, if I was just a little bit bigger, I would both kill and eat you.
Well, sure. And that's played out through the big jungle cats.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So
they're pretty much the same creature, just in a small version. I can tell you that.
Yes. Yeah, that's why they're called big jungle cats. Yeah.
Okay.
But you don't have big jungle dogs taking over people and stuff.
No,
so
you got hyenas and coyotes and wolves. Wolves.
Yeah.
I don't know that you could take a wolf.
No. How did Thundercats mix in with the big jungle cats and domesticated cats?
Well, Thundercats was a fine idea in the 80s. I wasn't a big Thundercats kid, to be honest. No.
Neither was I.
Well, see, I feel like Steve was more of the age. I remember it being there and being, that's for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and Steve would be the kids.
Yeah, I wanted to be. My mom was against it. Yeah, she thought it was like human and animal hybrids, and she didn't realize they were aliens. And but now, so Silverhawks was my jam. I did enjoy Silverhawks. It's kind of an interesting thing, and this is not Star Wars at all. And this is not what I was just going to bring to the table and throw down at all. But there's this interesting thing that's happened especially in the toy collecting space with the revival of all of these different franchises and everything. Hasbro's, of course, brought several things back. And then you've got like Super 7 Studios and NECA and those kind of places doing some different things. Turtles is real big right now, of course, and that's fine. That's great. Turtles never really went away. But like the fervor for a product like Silverhawks, when Silverhawks only lasted like a season. Now, granted, a season in the 80s for afternoon television was like 60 something episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it really wasn't that big a deal. Like kids on the playground weren't talking about the latest Silverhawks episode. They were kind of low on the totem pole. And everyone realized, well, this is just a repackaging of Thundercats, even though we didn't know the word repackaging. So what's been really interesting to me is like with them, and then an even lower thing on the totem pole, Sectars, and a few other things, man, people just act like this was the best in the 80s. And I want to sit there and say, you didn't care. You didn't care.
Yeah. Let's go there for a second, because one of the things I see a lot of, and I'm glad you brought this up because it's the thing I've been worrying about. And again, you as the kind of the guy of that age, I keep seeing all this really rampant nostalgia for Mask.
Yeah.
And Mask was never anything for me other than an occasional ad on the back of a comic book.
Yeah.
I had no knowledge of the workings of Mask.
Yeah. Mask had a really good cartoon. Mask was Kenner's answer to Transformers in a lot of ways. I mean, when they took that property and it was Deke, I think, who did the animation and the cartoon and all. I know in my area the cartoon came on in the morning, so like 7 so it was like Inspector Gadget, Mask, hour-long block there.
So you had to get up while you were getting ready for school.
You'd watch it. Yeah. Really cool concept. You had a car that the doors would pop up and be wings, and boosters would come out. You had a motorcycle that turned into a helicopter, a Jeep that launched out a boat, all kinds of different things. A truck that would become like a mobile command center and missile launcher kind of thing. So it was a neat concept. Of course, you had good guys and bad guys. So it was a neat concept. And it's the one thing that they haven't really, outside of some comic book stuff and outside of, there was one G.I. Joe action figure when they were doing like the 25th or 30th anniversary stuff or whatever. They made Matt Tracker, who was the leader of the Mask team. And outside of that, there's been no attempt to remake, relaunch, put out new merch or anything with Mask. And so I think what it is there's a cry from kids of that ilk who loved Mask. And Mask, I would say Mask was relatively popular. It was I think because it came along at a time when Star Wars was out. So you had in that early 80s, you had Star Wars, which I really think was the pinnacle. And right beneath Star Wars, to me, in my opinion, was G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero.
Yes, absolutely.
And then right there, not far from G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, and really neck and neck for that third to second place arena, He-Man and Transformers. I mean, these were the big guns, the walking dogs of 80s properties. And so everything else was just trying to get a piece of that. Well, Mask, I think, came in a really solid fourth. Mask was a solid toy line that was unique enough and playable enough and affordable enough that kids were into it.
But here's where I'm hearing the flaw.
Okay.
Like Transformers, you have vehicles, and vehicles are cool. Kids like vehicle toys. Hot Wheels have had a robust history, right?
Yeah.
Tonka has a robust history.
Yep.
You got vehicles that turn into robots, and robots are the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
But Mask, they went, hey, we've got vehicles that turn into other vehicles.
That's right.
So there's a falling short there to me.
Well, but see, that's where you get into the story arc, because you have good guys and bad guys that are using this technology. And then they also have the mask, the helmets, and all the helmets had different powers that they would do. So you might shoot laser rays, you might have like a spectrum thing where you could X-ray things or look at, different. And so you had those, and then you had, and this was one of the successes of Transformers and G.I. Joe on the television, is with that cartoon, you had very distinct personalities in all of the different players that played. And one of the cool things about Mask is whenever a mission came up, you'd have the computer be like, assembling proper team for Mask, and so it was a secret organization. It's that thing that boys love, it's like super secret, operatives doing this stuff. And so you can be driving down the road on your motorcycle, and that's cool. And all of a sudden you've got to get where you're going. So James Bond that mess, turn it into a helicopter, and off you go.
This is the foundation of QAnon. You know that, right? This is
I don't think that's the case.
The little boys that love this grew up and went, I'll bet there's a secret agency around the world that's I can hear it now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that that comes out of I think it's a product of the Cold War, to be honest with you.
So when you guys were talking about Mask, I had no idea. Bypassed me completely.
Yeah.
Never saw it. Never thought about it. I was thinking of Jim Carrey and The Mask.
No.
And then, you guys talking about these things transforming and all that made me think of Big, where Tom Hanks is sitting in there going, what if we take this truck and we make it into a pterodactyl, and the guy's like, dinosaur into a robot. And yeah, it just popped right in my head. So
it's a building. What else does it do? Yeah. The thing is you had, and I think that's one of the things that is missing in properties today, as far as I can tell, is the success of the 80s with all of the restrictions on the FCC kind of lifted, or the restrictions were lifted, by the FCC on advertising and that sort of thing. What happened is you had creative people with certain restrictions on them, like He-Man could never stab anyone or slice anyone with his sword, so to speak, but it was a lot of punching and throwing and that sort of thing. But what you had were these people that sit down with these cartoon properties or a comic book property, and they actually worked at developing characters around these different toys and everything. And so you had storylines. So you could take, just like with Star Wars figures and Star Wars toys, you could take and then continue the adventure off the screen with these things. And
that's really why the comics and the animated series were so important for those properties, because you didn't have that movie as the basis that you could use to take off from.
Yeah. And so you had toy companies developing these ideas or buying ideas that had been developed, that sort of thing. And I know with He-Man, like Mattel, they went to distributors, and distributors like, I don't know if we're into this. Like, well, what about the comic? We'll have a comic with each one. They're like, oh, okay, that might sell, And then someone just spoke, what about the cartoon? We haven't told you about the cartoon. And they were like, oh, you got a cartoon coming? Oh, we're sold. So then Mattel had to go back and figure out, well, how are we going to do a cartoon? And thus here, thus Lou Schreiber and Filmation, come into play there. So, but then there was a clamp down on that kind of stuff. again in the 90s. You know, it's like, well,
Was
we
there?
can't. Yeah, that there a lot of the restrictions that have to do with advertising to kids were lifted in a lot of ways. Plus,
Yes.
you take that and you take the advent of, you know, cable becoming real big and Cartoon Network and those sorts of things, and it just became, it wasn't as viable to have a cartoon company anymore. You know, especially as Warner Brothers is buying up, you know, Hanna-Barbera and whoever else they could get their hands on, you know, as far as animation studios goes. Hanna-Barbera used to be the walking dog, in my opinion, of animation.
You know, it's funny you say that, because I just was, what was it that I was just reading? It was denigrating all the Hanna-Barbera stuff as being too similar.
Well, I mean, they made a cookie cutter and said, okay,
Yeah.
let's change it from a dog to a shark. Let's change it from a
Yeah.
dog to a shark to a
That's
dune buggy.
Yeah,
Yes.
Change it to, I mean, it was
that
the
is
same
exactly what
plan.
I was reading. Yes.
Yeah, Josie and the Pussycats put a cat there, right? And they're a band. I mean, it was that follow along, but it worked, right? I mean, how many of those do we remember that it was good stuff? It was.
But I think I think that's a reductive statement about the Hanna-Barbera Animation Studios, because you also get Huckleberry Hound and Quick Draw McGraw and Yogi Bear and Snaggletooth and all these different Snagglepuss, yeah, and a lot of these different characters that became, you know, the wacky
Snaggletooth
racers.
is pink, not blue.
Yeah,
that's right. The wacky racers and the
Scooby-Doo. Nobody even mentioned Scooby-Doo. What is wrong with you people?
Well, Scooby-Doo is that thing that they're saying is they had success with Scooby-Doo, so
right.
make it a shark.
I got you. Okay,
But
I mean, even when it was being the thing was, I'm trying to remember what it was I was reading, if it was that Alan Dean Foster book or what it was, but they were even going back though to like Flintstones, Jetsons, you know, that far back. And they basically said Tom and Jerry, which is where, you know, Hanna and Barbera got their start.
Yeah.
Tom and Jerry were great, and then they went off and became nothing but cookie cutter stuff after that, which, you know, there's a certain sameness. I mean, the Flintstones is the Honeymooners. I mean, I don't think anybody can walk away from that, but there's a certain sameness between what the Flintstones do and what the Jetsons do, both of which were kind of their old primetime cartoons.
Sure, I'll give you that, but I also say, but you get the full body of Hanna-Barbera, and you get things like Johnny Quest, you get things like Space Ghost and Birdman, and you know, and though they're Herculoids, for crying out loud,
and Herculoids, which I still to this day don't even understand.
I don't know where they're from or what's going on there. Is that Earth in the past, or is that a distant planet somewhere in the far reaches of space?
And isn't Shmoo on Herculoids?
There is a Shmoo
on Herculoids.
What is Shmoo? Which one is Shmoo?
Shmoo's the big white round
blob kind of
blobby thing. Yeah, you have Gleep and Gloop.
But I think he started in Little Abner, didn't he?
Oh God!
Yeah,
isn't Shmoo a Little Abner character? And all of a sudden he shows up in Herculoids out of nowhere.
Well, no, now the Shmoo is different than them, because the Shmoo has like a face and whiskers and and big eyes and eyebrows, and he has feet. The Gleep and Gloop didn't have feet; they just had kind of some
bounce.
I don't think they even had mouths.
But then Shmoo did show up on one of those Saturday morning shows.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
What did he show up on?
I'm not sure.
Well, you're not helping me here.
But anyways,
so was Thunder the Barbarian was also Hanna-Barbera, correct?
Yes.
Thunder was great.
And I liked him because he had the sword as well. I mean, I kind of dug that.
Thundar was Star Wars.
Thundar was Star Wars. Thundar was Hanna-Barbera doing Star Wars. I mean, right down to Ookla the Mock being basically a Chewbacca stand-in.
Correct.
But here's the thing. By the time Thundar comes along, and I was thinking about this the other day because I think about stupid things all the time. And I was thinking about how, as a kid, I always viewed Hanna-Barbera as the pinnacle of an animation studio, because Filmation was you could tell they were reusing the same cells over and over and over again on their stuff.
Yes.
With
watch the Star Trek show.
With Hanna-Barbera. Well, you look at Ghostbusters and He-Man from the 80s, and not the real Ghostbusters, mind you, Ghostbusters. But Hanna-Barbera didn't have a lot happening on weekday cartoons. You had your Sunbow and your Deke. You had
Sunbow
Filmation.
Was your G.I. Joe Transformers, yeah.
Right. You had your Rankin Bass, which was Thundercats and Silverhawks, you know. And then you had a lot of this repurposed anime from Japan, Voltron, Tranzor Z, those sorts of things.
Battle of the Planets.
And yeah, and so but what was happening is Hanna-Barbera was hitting those Saturday morning cartoons. And you couldn't get through a Saturday morning without that swirly star coming at you. Bing, you know, and that was going to be your Super Friends. That was going to be Smurfs. That was going to be Thundar the Barbarian early on in the 80s. That was going to be just about everything you saw on certain networks. You know, ABC got more of the Disney stuff because of that connection's always been there. And CBS had a lot of the more of the Sunbow and
they had Raggedy Ann and Andy.
CBS also had Looney Tunes though for a long time.
I thought that was always ABC.
No, it came to ABC later, but it was CBS's for most of the time.
For a long time.
When it was 90 minutes, it was CBS.
Yeah. Well, they also had, CBS had Muppet Babies in the middle of the 80s there, or the early 80s. And they had a block when video games were huge, And when I say video games were huge, Pac-Man, Hubert, Pole Position, which was one of the great theme songs of a cartoon of all time. And when I say, and you guys can attest to this, when I know video games are just kind of a thing now in the culture, but in those early 80s, man, arcades, having some type of home system, whether it was Pong or an Atari 26, video games were huge for a little bit, and of course the industry almost dried up, and here came Nintendo around to kind of save that industry. But there were, in those early 80s, man,
one of my favorite things was that Pac-Man had to do its thing to appease the arcade people and the Atari fans as well. When the game came out, the creatures were monsters. They were monsters. That was it. But when Atari released its version of Pac-Man, because they could not stabilize those monsters and they had a permanent flicker to them, they had to call them ghosts. The only reason they could excuse away the flicker. So when Pac-Man does his TV show, what does he call them? Ghost monsters.
Okay, yeah. I never knew that they were called monsters originally. I always knew them as ghosts.
No, they weren't ghosts until Atari put their version out.
So do you guys remember the game Dragon's Lair, right?
Yeah,
of course.
Don Bluth.
Didn't they have a Saturday morning cartoon of that as well? I know they had a Dungeons and Dragons Saturday morning, but
there was a Dungeons and Dragons.
Dragon's Lair did a season or two. Maybe I'm way off.
They did, yeah. There was, and I think it was Don Bluth animation as well. I mean, because they had it they had all the assets from doing that video game. But yeah, there was a Dragon's Lair cartoon.
That's a much cheaper animation though. So yeah, I don't know that they needed all those assets because I mean, Dragon's Lair, the game, was done very, very, very. Yes. That was high budget animation. That was Secret of NIMH style Don Bluth animation. Right. But I don't think what they do on Saturday mornings is so much.
Ruby Spears did that in 83 or in 85. 84 and 85.
Yeah, so I was gonna say I didn't think it looked Don Bluthy.
No, it didn't. It's 13 episodes.
So that's one
season.
Yeah.
See, I tore that game up at Chuck E. Cheese or Showbiz Pizza Palace, whatever it was at the time. I thought that game, when I saw it go from being a Donkey Kong and a Pac-Man to that, I thought, wow, where are we going with video games? Because it was played out in much more of a cartoon movie kind of a setup instead of, like so many bits or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it was just one of those things that stood out to me. But I can tell you, there's only a very few actual media that I purchased related to cartoons, and that is Scooby-Doo and the Smurfs. I was a big Scooby-Doo fan my whole life. I always have been. My wife and I, gosh, we bought way, way long ago when the kids were little, the DVDs of like as many seasons of Scooby-Doo as we could, the Scooby-Doo movies, all that kind of stuff. I don't know why it stuck with me, but that show always did. And then there was something about the Smurfs. I don't know. Maybe it was just taking you into this otherworldly kind of thing, but as weird as it probably sounds, I love the Smurfs. They were just so fun and different, and I don't know, just stuck with me. I don't know if you guys ever watched the Smurfs that much or not.
Of course, dude. They were my Saturday morning staples, man. Smurfs were huge. That's another thing that was just, I know that's below Scott, but Smurfs, when they hit America, man, they were huge. Here's something I didn't realize.
They were huge. I did not like Smurfs.
we misspoke earlier, but you mentioned we talked about that one being Ruby Spears. Ruby Spears actually did Thundar the Barbarian.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Yeah, they did. Well, Ruby and Spears were the sound editors that spun out. They were actually came from Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's why it has that kind of feel. But I didn't realize how much they did. The Plastic Man comedy adventure show.
I remember that. Yeah.
That's a
which was
great. That's
fun.
funny.
They
Yeah.
did Heathcliff.
Marmaduke then too.
They did Marmaduke. Yeah, they did. Scott, you'll remember in the early '80s, and you may too, Marinera, that they used to have some cartoons based on live action shows. So you had Mork and Mindy, Laverne and Shirley.
Laverne and
Oh, yeah.
Shirley. Oh,
Hours.
gosh,
Happy Days.
yes.
Yeah. Happy Day. The Fonz and the Happy Days gang.
Yeah. That's that was Ruby Spears. The aforementioned Pac-Man cartoon.
You know,
Mr. T, the Mr. T cartoon.
you know what the big problem with those Laverne and Shirley and Fonz Happy Days and stuff? My big problem with all that stuff was I'm a continuity nut. And so it would drive me nuts. It's like, where in the episode would Richie and them have jumped on a time machine?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And zipped around time with the Fonz? Because I don't remember how this would have, and I would in my brain try to work out how exactly.
Well, it was leftover technology from when Mork showed up that one time.
Was that what it was?
Yeah.
And then the Laverne and Shirley angle, I think, was they joined the military.
They joined the army, yeah.
Yep.
And I'm trying to remember what Mork and Mindy, because they're all different things. I'm trying to remember what Mork and Mindy's angle was, but it was not just regular old, Mork shows up at the record shop.
A Gilligan's Island cartoon for a while.
There was a Gilligan's Island cartoon.
That was back in the 70s.
Gilligan's Planet. It was
Gilligan's
Planet, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
And I think that was a Filmation, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that was Filmation. Yeah.
Yeah,
Filmation had a lot of that stuff too in the 60s and 70s. Now, Ruby Spears also did Turbo Teen, which has become a particular punchline. But Turbo Teen was literally a dude, a real human being who turned into a car whenever he got hot. So he'd get heated up and he would turn into a car. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. But Ruby Spears also did the Superman cartoon there toward the late 80s. And it only lasted like 13 or 14 episodes, I think, that Superman cartoon. But it's notable because they used the John Williams theme at the beginning of that of that cartoon. And it was Superman. Let's see, he teamed up with Wonder Woman in one of the episodes, but a lot of Lex Luthor, it was very much movie. It had a Superman the movie kind of feel to it as far as the characterizations of the people went.
You mentioned the tiers of things in the early 80s, so forth. I'm noticing not a lot, and I guess I don't remember this much, besides Justice League or things like that. Were there many superhero cartoons in the early 80s? Because I feel like it was more of a 70s leading into Super Friends.
Well, Super Friends lingered, and then you had Superpowers too.
You had the Galactic Superpowers show, and Super Friends kind of morphed in that. You did have the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Yes, Stan Lee.
And there was a short-lived Incredible Hulk animated series in the early 80s.
And Thing Ring, Do Your Thing.
Now that's is that in the 60s, 70s, Scott?
No, the 70s.
It would have been
early 80s.
70s, early 80s, yeah. Because it was they did a Fantastic Four with Herbie. That's the 80s. Because they did Fantastic Four with Herbie because they couldn't do the Human Torch because they were afraid kids would set themselves on fire. They weren't afraid that kids would try to stretch themselves 500 feet. But they had Herbie the Robot, which was a horrible idea, and they had the Thing, and that was on NBC. And it was just like he was a teenage
kid.
Thing Ring.
Yep.
Yeah, that was the end of the 70s. That was like 78, 79 is when that Fantastic Four cartoon and the thing came on. Oh, Benji. Not Ben Grimm, but Benji. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I used to watch those in reruns down at St. Simon's in the summer. I remember that's when I discovered that stuff. Absolutely fascinated by it too. I was. Speaking of Superman, if I can go back to that, guys, I read something. I finished reading something this morning while I was at the service station with my vehicle getting it serviced. The Superman 78 comic series that DC put out, I guess last year. If you guys haven't read it, it's worth a read on your Kindle reader, or your Comixology app. The art is a little bit more inconsistent than I want it to be, but when they'll catch certain angles of faces and certain stuff, it's like it's almost like they took a film cell and traced Christopher Reeve or Margot Kidder.
Nice.
He fights Brainiac, and it really is like the spirit of the Christopher Reeve Superman is there, and the spirit of the Gene Hackman Lex Luthor is there, and it's a great natural sequel to those films, but because it's a comic book, it's able to be ramped up a little bit, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. And there's some other Donner nods throughout the little series, and so it's not Star Wars, but I highly recommend Superman 78. And that kind of leads me to this question, because you old fogies were around live, as it happened during the day. And I know this is a Star Wars podcast, and we've heard you guys talk about when you saw Star Wars and everything, but was Superman even on your radar? Is that something you even care about? Do you have any nostalgia for it at all?
Superman the movie?
Yeah,
Christopher
Superman
Reeve?
the movie.
Are you kidding me?
Yes.
I'm not kidding you, Scott. We've never really talked about. I realized you and I've never really talked about this.
You and I, as many heart to hearts as we've had, have never had the conversations about Superman.
Never have.
Oh my! Well, first off, the first comic I ever owned was a Superman comic that I think I stole from my brother.
There you go.
So did you really own it then?
Well, possession is 9/10 of the law, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
so I owned it. But when Superman, I mean, I can tell you, I went to Altama Village Triple Cinema to see it for the first time with my brother. We came out and I was blown away. I was blown away by that movie.
Did you believe a man could fly?
I did believe a man could fly when I saw that. I remember missing Superman 2 at the theater because there was only one day that it was on the 99-cent special. And that's when Mom took me, and it sold out before I could get in.
Wow.
So yeah. So I didn't get to see it at the theater. I had to wait till it came on HBO, and I was crushed by that. And I loved that movie. We could have a lengthy discussion about the fact that contrary to popular opinion, the Lester cut is better than the Donner cut, period.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
And look, I love the first Superman. I love Richard Donner's work, but there was a point in time when I was in college where, I mean, I just was hit, and this is, I don't know, 89, 90. I was living by myself, I guess, at the time. And I just was like, I have not seen the Superman movies in forever. I've got to see the Superman movie. And, you don't have streaming.
Right.
And so I literally searched all over town one day in Tallahassee, went to every Turtles, every record bar, every music. Superman 2, but by the end of the day, I did it. I mean, I rode all over town before I found two people who had them and loved it. So that having been said, by fall of 91, we wind up on the set of Lethal Weapon 3, and we're hanging out with Dick Donner's assistant all day, off and on. And he's like, okay, huh?
Jeff Johns?
No, it was Jason Roberts is his name, actually. He was an assistant. He was an assistant on the Jurassic Park sequels that they've been doing. But he got us in with Donner, and Donner came and shook all of our hands, and we all got to say a little something to him before he started holding forth. And all I could say as he shook my hand was, I just looked at him. He huge, tall guy, and I just looked up at him and went, "I love Superman." That was
nice.
My main thing I ever said to to Dick Donner. The other thing was, who's writing this movie? But yeah, so Superman the movie and Superman 2 are vital parts of my formative years. Superman 3, I saw at the theater. I read the DC adaptation 1,000 times. I don't harbor a lot of ill will for it, but I don't love it like I love those first two.
Sure.
I don't remember much about Superman 3. Honestly, I think I probably saw it one time. So, but Superman 1 and 2, fantastic. Loved every minute of it. And you know what? It has been forever since I've watched those. And I'm gonna force Mrs. Molinaro to sit down, and we're gonna do a rewatch of Superman 1 and 2 at least to check that out, because they were. I mean, I thought that was incredible. The music, the just seeing a superhero like that it just blew me away. So yeah, I loved everything about Superman 1 and 2 for sure.
It's funny because G-Man gets a lot of his movie taste from what I've exposed him to as a kid. And one of the things that we do, we'll just break into a spontaneous conversation about those first couple of Superman movies. And one of the things that always blows us away is how perfect Christopher Reeve is in the entire role. And by that, I mean, you should not be able to believe a 6'4" thick and hunky guy is some gigantic nerd who's completely inept and incompetent. And you know what? You do.
Right.
It's not just that you believe a man
just
can
with
fly,
the
but you
daggone
believe
glasses.
Yeah. And the thing is,
well,
it's not just you will believe a man can fly, but it's you will believe that a man who can fly can fool other people into thinking he's an incompetent nerd.
Watch if you do get a chance to watch it, Joey, watch very closely after the flight scene that drags the whole movie down with him and Lois. That whole interaction, the whole flying date kind of ruins the momentum of the movie, but it's necessary and it's fun that it's there and you get to see them really show off the flying stuff and everything. But there's two things to watch for. When he drops her off and she turns and says goodbye and he flies off, it's a single cut. There's no cutaway. Following her from the outside of her balcony into her apartment to the door where Clark is knocking, and as she opens the door, Clark is there. So they do, and all that's done through back projection. Like, it's an amazing trick of the eye, and it's an amazing thing they do that you don't think about. There's no cut there, but there's no cut there. And then as he comes in and he's like, I was just I just decided, darn it, I'm going to show you a good time. And she's like, well, let me go,
time of your life.
And she goes and
That's
gets
Clark. Nice.
She's going to get a jacket. And in that moment, he takes off his glasses and he straightens up.
Yes.
And he says, Lois, there's something I have to tell you. And she comes out and says, what is it, Clark? And he's like, well, I was. And he's fumbling to put his glasses because he chickens out. He won't tell her he's Superman. And he goes right back in. And so it's this little moment that is intentionally put there to show you, yes, this works. This can work, given someone smart enough. And I don't know that anyone has done, the George Reeves Superman is really great and kind of a classic thing. And it, to me, it stands in a very special place. And I like his Clark Kent. I like this Clark Kent's not bumbling and silly, but you can tell that Clark Kent Superman. Same thing with Dean Cain. Dean Cain played a more George Reeves style Clark Kent in the Lois and Clark, but
he kind of played what John Byrne turned Clark into.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was that era.
John Byrne's Clark Kent. Christopher Reeves Clark Kent would not play football.
Right.
Right. John Byrne's Clark Kent, they made it a point to say he not only played, he was a football star.
Yeah.
Right.
He was not the nerd. He was not the outcast.
Right. But yeah, so look, and it's, I don't think it's unfair for people to, when you start talking about Superman casting in anything, to draw comparisons to Christopher Reeve. I just don't think it's unfair. I think that he was so earnest in that role, and such a, even Superman 4, which I know is the much maligned Superman 4. When you see him at the end of that movie talk about what Earth means to him, and it's like he does it in such an earnest, real way. You're like, he is Superman, and he took he took a lot of pride and a lot of he protected that character. Like, he was very proud of that character and was very serious about that character. So much so that Tom Welling, when Christopher Reeve guest starred on Smallville, Tom Welling said, he pulled me over the side and he was telling me all about this Superman stuff in the comics. And Tom had never really read. I said, hold on. I don't need to know this. I need to go forward without this knowledge because I don't know what I'm going to become. But like, he geeked out on Tom Welling about Superman, and Superman 78, DC did it. It's great. I think they're doing another volume starting in November, I think. And like, to the point, I enjoyed it so much reading through it that I'm looking forward to it again. Again, the art's a little inconsistent, but they're just great moments, and it's a really well thought out and good Brainiac story.
I'm glad to hear that, because several years ago when they started the Batman 66 series, I was all gung-ho for their doing that because I love the Batman 66 series. And when I got the book, I didn't think it didn't quite hit it for me.
Yeah.
And so when Superman 78 came out, I said to myself, well, they'll probably do the same thing and just not quite get there for me. So the fact that you're saying it got there for you, that makes me happy.
I didn't read I read some of the Batman 66, and I feel like what they did with that is the thing about Batman, that Batman 66 is like, at some point that it's campy, but the people who are, it's Leslie Nielsen in Airplane. He delivers every line with earnestness and seriousness, and
that's
it's
what the
funny as
series
all
was.
get out. And Batman and Robin, though they're saying some outlandish things, they're taking Riddler's clues and they're making incredible leaps of logic. They do it with a straight face and not even a wink at the audience. You know what I mean?
And that's what's great about it.
So I would say this before Star Wars came out, the two things that I was really into as a little kid, I still remember. I've got pictures of me sitting there on Christmas Day and playing with things on my birthday and all that. Were the Batman 66 shows and the movie and Planet of the Apes. For some reason, I love the Planet of the Apes, especially when the toys came out to go along with the movie, even though that movie's a little harsh for a little kid, but still, it was really cool. So just like Christopher Reeve is, in my opinion, Superman and everyone else is a variation of that, I would say, and it's probably taken poorly by a lot of people, Adam West is Batman to me. And, there's been some people, Michael Keaton was fun, and Christian Bale did an okay job and all that kind of stuff. But those are different kinds of Batmans. I particularly care for the campy, fun Batman like that. I'm not into even though it's called the Dark Knight, all that kind of stuff. I don't, the darkness doesn't do it for me. I prefer it to be fun. I prefer it to be colorful. I prefer it to be crazy, kooky characters to go along with it. So I don't know where you guys stand on Batman, but that's my take on the Batman.
There was a comic that they did. I forget who put it out, but it was an Adam West comic. And the premise of the comic is that Adam West somehow got to get into some kind of adventures. I don't remember the premise of the story, but I remember that it opens up with an older Adam West kind of reminiscing on some things. And basically one of the quotes as he's thinking, he's like, I was a caped crusader and they all want a dark knight now,
Nice.
And I love that line because that really is the difference between what Batman was, even with like the Super Friends and the Batman and Robin filmation cartoons, he was a caped crusader. And when the Dark Knight kind of came about, obviously DC had success with Frank Miller's Dark Knight stuff, and obviously there's a little bit of a getting back to the roots from the 30s and the early 40s of Batman with that, but yeah, I'm like you. But the thing I think that the Batman 66 comic does a little too much is it winks too much at the audience. Like there's too many.
So your comparison of Leslie Nielsen in Airplane for the show and more like Leslie Nielsen in Repossessed,
right?
Or Spy Hard,
yeah,
where he is just smirking and mugging for the camera, and it's exactly what you don't want him to do because that's what makes it not funny.
Yeah.
Or Naked Gun 33 1/3.
Right.
Yeah.
So Superman 78, there's not a lot of camp in it. There is some, like Lex Luthor's calling himself the greatest, like he's coming up with these nicknames, and finally Lois, there's a point where he and Lois are together, and Lois says, you need to can it with your self-aggrandizing nicknames, and he's like, duly noted, and he just goes on, and it's like so there's that spirit of it, but it's not so campy. It doesn't lean into Superman 3 kind of camp, because that's one of the issues. Superman 3 is, especially to be a movie from the early 80s, is not a bad movie.
No,
it's just not. Because they brought Richard Pryor in, they thought, and Richard Lester, had this comedic bent to him that he brought to Superman 2 and stuff. And so he wanted more of that in Superman 3, because I think in his mind, much like Joel Schumacher with Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, he thought, this is a superhero show. It's supposed to be kind of funny, and
I think a lot of that though is that Batman 66 hangover.
Yeah.
Where it was just kind of comic stuff is silly.
Yeah, because that show was still in heavy syndication, in those days. I mean, I watched a ton of Batman from 1966 in syndication as a kid during those days.
Watched it every day.
Yeah.
Watched it every day when I was a kid. You know, for Joe, you know, mine was Star Trek and Batman. And Planet of the Apes was up there too for me, but my biggies were Star Trek and Batman. So those were the things I watched before Star Wars. That was, you know, there was a world before Star Wars. We don't tend to remember that, but we did have things that we loved before then.
Well, Joe, right. you mentioned Planet of the Apes being heavy for a kid. There was a cartoon though, like they, I mean, much like
Filmation.
Yes,
Filmation again, right? much like RoboCop and Aliens, you know, and Rambo, for crying out loud, you know, this property that was a little kind of like might be over the kid's head, you know, suddenly was being made for kids and pushed on kids. Of course, I don't know, like Planet of the Apes, did it come out before there were actually movie ratings? Because as I recall, I remember always seeing it just kind of being given almost a PG or G rating sometimes when you would see it.
In fact, I think Conquest was originally GP.
Okay.
Because before there was PG, there was GP.
Are God's people?
No.
That's what
I don't remember.
General practitioner. Yeah.
So
I said general practitioner.
No, it was GP. It was a parental guidance. It was PG, but it was, for whatever reason they would call it. It was the original name of it was GP.
Well,
interesting.
I know that you know, but the thing is, it's like, of course, that's going to catch your kid's imagination. You know, monkeys ruling the world. Come on.
Yeah, it was fantastic. My daughter, who is 21, when she was in her teens, she saw some of the newer ones coming out, and I said, "Honey, if you like these, let's go back and watch the originals." She has them all on DVD now. Even the really corny, weird ones at the end. You know, however many there were. She has all.
Wait. Planet of the Apes?
Yeah.
Corny, weird ones. Oh, Joe, we got to have a conversation.
Well, there were some odd storylines going on there.
We've got to have some real conversations.
Was there not a
I still watched them all.
Was there not a television show as well?
Yes,
or was it just the cartoon?
There was. 1974, there was a half season. I think it lasted 13 episodes.
Okay.
Which, by the way, 13 episodes now was a complete season.
Yeah, that's a series.
That's a story arc.
Yeah.
That was a half season. They used to, you know, they would they'd order 13, and then if they got a full season order, they'd call it picking up the back 9, because that was the completed season order gets you to 22.
Right.
But they did 13. They did a half season. It was on CBS. And one of the interesting things about that is, you know, they used to take a lot of those shows and cut them into movies and distribute them in Europe and in syndication as movies. For some reason, I guess an hour drama didn't really have a thing that really got it over in syndication, with certain exceptions like Star Trek. But selling them as movies, they did the same thing with the Spider-Man series. If you remember, they cut it into movies.
Yeah.
And
that's how they packaged it on video later on down the road.
Yeah. See, yeah. But as far as the Apes go, they did 13 episodes. They did that, but the films, there were 5 films. There was Planet of the Apes. There was Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Then there was Escape from the Planet of the Apes, where Victor Newman takes them in and has them, tries to capture them, and they escape back to here to the early 70s. And then the next one is, spoiler alert, because I think we've had a few years to get past this, right?
Yes.
Okay. Zira and Cornelius get killed, and their son is hidden away on a circus, and that's Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. That's the 4th one, and that's one a lot of people realize. It's one I don't like, but it's the one where they kind of, the apes rebel and all of that. Yep. And then the 5th one is Battle for the Planet of the Apes, and that's the one people really don't like, and I do like that one. But it's the one where, the apes and the humans have to have kind of they wind up having battles but get together, basically. And I think that one came out after the series.
I have only ever seen that original Planet of the Apes, and then the newer stuff.
Really?
Oh, King Tut tries to destroy the world in the 2nd one. You'll love that.
King Tut.
Oh yeah,
Victor Bono
from Batman.
Okay, yeah.
Victor Bono, and then the 3rd one, the 3rd one, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, is kind of the Planet of the Apes, the Voyage Home, where they escape to contemporary America.
But now Charlton Heston isn't in all of them.
He is at the beginning and very end of the 2nd one.
Yep.
And that was the
That's
thing
it.
where he didn't want to do it. And they're like, come on, we got a contract with you. Will you just show up for these 2 days of filming or whatever? And so he's at the beginning, and then they have basically a cipher for him.
Yep.
They have James Franciscus, I think, plays. I'm trying to remember his name now. Anyway, James Franciscus plays the Taylor type character, but it's not Taylor.
Charlton Heston, I believe, in the first movie was from Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Ah,
yeah,
nice.
I personally always wanted to see about
Brent.
Because there is not obviously a ton related to TV and movies in Indiana, but I thought how cool it would be to have a television and movie Hall of Fame in Indiana to where you could put Joyce DeWitt from Three's Company and Shelley Long from Cheers because they were from Indiana, put them in there, but then also shows like Stranger Things and the character from, Planet of the Apes, put all these things that were related to Indiana in a Hall of Fame related to Indiana. Yeah, one day at a time, for example.
You have Terre Haute get eaten by mold.
What?
In it was destroyed by mold in Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid in the late 30s.
Oh my gosh, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid.
Remember, he was going to destroy the entire country with mold, and he triggered the bomb that set off the mold, and then they had the big thing of the country, and that part fell in as Steve Martin undid the bomb of the mold, and as von Kluck falls over dead, he says, "At least we got Terre Haute, Indiana." And then Steve Martin's Rigby Reardon says, "Damn, they were just about to get a public library."
Oh gosh, Terre Haute, yes, hot land. That's what it's called. Hey, were either one of you guys fans of the show Frasier? Did you ever watch it much?
I didn't dislike it. I just didn't watch it much.
I watched through it. It's been.
You mean like you saw through it, or was
no, I watched through the show. I did a watch through, because I'd never watched it when it was originally airing.
Okay.
And so when it was streaming, I did Cheers, followed immediately by Frasier, because I never really watched either of those.
Did you slide the Tortellis in there a little bit?
Yeah.
Carla,
did they get a spinoff? Did Carla get a spinoff?
No,
Nick,
her husband.
Yeah, Nick did. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
With the
it lasted like
girl.
6 episodes or something.
Yeah. I was never really into Cheers because when it started, I was too young, and so as I got old enough to care, I'm like, I don't care. And so Frasier to me just always seemed a little too. Like, I don't care, but I watched. It was good. I enjoyed it. There's some great. I like self-aware moments from time to time in TV shows like that. So there's that one time where he dates where the character comes on and she was like a children's entertainer.
Oh gosh, yes.
And she's talking to him. She's like, "Oh, do you know how terrible?" She said, "You can't imagine, Frasier, how hard it is to play the same character for 11 years, just all the time." And it's like. And everyone kind of gives it a good laugh, but again, there's no winking at the camera or anything. It's like literally, and he says it must be horrible, and so that's one of the moments I remember. I always like, and then of course watching through after having watched Cheers, I'm like, I always like the episodes when people from Cheers would show up.
Sure. The only reason I brought it up is because Paramount Plus, his new
revival.
Frasier came out. I watched the first 2 episodes last night. It's not going to, I doubt it's going to be the quality of the last show, but I was a huge Frasier fan. I was a huge Cheers fan, followed by Frasier. So I'm excited to see where it goes, but obviously going in knowing it's probably not going to reach those heights of what I watched in the past. But just thought I would ask.
It's probably the same thing. And I read a review of the show that was just horrid in USA Today yesterday, but it's probably the same thing that I felt like with the Night Court revival. I gave every single episode of that Night Court revival a shot because I just kept thinking one day maybe they'll give me a little bit of that old magic. But one thing I learned was that comedy today, they have so many more rules today as to what is and is allowed to be funny that it just can't work anymore. The things that we thought were funny, we're correct. They were funny. They're still funny. But you're not allowed to do, and it's funny because you're not like allowed, you're not told that you can't think those old things are funny, but you can't think new things like that are funny anymore.
Right.
And so the Night Court thing did a lot. I mean, look, a lot of the humor of Night Court came from just the complete lecherousness of Dan Fielding, who now spends the entire revival pining for his late wife.
Mm.
So that seems
isn't that
really
what they
weird.
do? Isn't that what they do though with a lot of the reboots and the newer stuff? It's like they take the characters that we knew and loved, and they're like, well, let's strip them down and make them sad and pathetic, and then like the new people, because the new people are going to be so much better and smarter, and they're everything that our old characters need, and and so.
Oh yeah, well, I mean,
sounds familiar.
The premise of the Night Court thing is that Harry's got a daughter, and the daughter that we've never heard of, who is of the age. I mean, she's Melissa Rauch is about 40, so you start doing the math. You're like, well, that had to have happened during the show. When will that have happened? And then she talks about being raised by him and growing up and him being so influential on her. It's like, when? What are you talking about? But she comes into the show and saves Dan.
Yeah.
Dan needs to be saved.
Right. But see, Scott, there's your continuity stuff again. Like, you can't look, it's just a cartoon. You can't worry about when the Fonz and them did, that's, you can't worry about when he had a kid with her, even though he was single that whole time and everything was going, the thing I look at and see some of these things, and it's just like, these shows did come to an end. They had, many of them had logical. If you're going to revive a show, they should have done a better Alf revival than what they did.
I liked the movie. The Project Alf.
Yeah, but the family wasn't there and everything.
But I liked it.
Yeah. But I'm just
Project
saying,
Alf. I'm just going to stop the show for a minute and say I never thought on Rule the Galaxy I would hear us have a discussion about Project Alf.
It's a space movie.
Yeah.
It's a space movie. Anyhow, I just think that there's a lot of times when they're bringing back these. I think it points to the lack of creativity
100%
in quote unquote Hollywood. I think that it does point to, hey, they're all trying to be safe, with these things, and so, but then in their safety they come in and they're like, well, wait, we can't be funny like we used to be funny. Look, there's some things on Cheers between Sam and Diane, and between some things that were said back and forth that could never be said today.
Nope.
I mean, there's one point where like Sam and Diane are like fighting, like literally like
slapping.
Yes. And you couldn't do that today.
No.
Guys, if you want to hear something really weird, you think a show from the 80s, there's things you can't do. My wife still loves to have friends on in the background while we're just doing stuff. I never really cared for the show. There's a few, I really like Matthew Perry's character, but I didn't really care for the show that much. But some of the dialogue they have, that you couldn't even do that in a show today. And that show is shown every day on television. Yeah. I don't know how they still keep it on, because I watch and I'm like, oh, you just said that. I'm not sure you can say that anymore. I mean, I can say it. Some people can't.
Yeah. But, you want to talk about how Hollywood doesn't quite get it. And Steve was kind of going there with this. If you watch that Night Court revival, the sets look amazing. It looks just right. The audience laughter sounds right. It looks and feels right. It's only when the characters show up and start saying stuff that you go, this ain't my Night Court. So
right.
they got all the wrong things right, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
That's kind of the nature of all of these reboots and remakes and continuations. They get all the wrong things right, and so you get a little nostalgia bomb here or there, and then you're expected to just ride that wave and accept everything else. And that's, listen, if since it's Rule of the Galaxy, I'll bring that over to
that's where we're going.
You've been laying the groundwork for it, so go ahead.
The Ahsoka series, you know what I mean? I enjoyed the Ahsoka series for what it was, but there were a lot of people giving that show a pass based on strictly nostalgia, especially once Hayden Christensen was on the scene. And and look, really neat to see him live action again. I'm glad. Obviously everyone always loved Hayden Christensen. No one ever had a problem with him. We're all so glad to see him back. And that's it. And look, I'm very bothered. I know. Listen, I'm very bothered by that attitude. I'm very bothered by these people who are like, I'm so glad to see Hayden Christensen back.
You mean the people who were trying to destroy him back in the day?
Yes, you hated Hayden Christensen.
Yeah.
The same people who are like, I'm so glad Ahmed Best got redeemed.
Yes.
It's like you were part of the problem.
You weren't in the trenches fighting for Jar Jar's integrity like some of us were.
Right. And so don't bring your nostalgia bombs and think that makes the whole show okay, because it does not. Now, there's some good things about the show. There's some not so great things about the show. Overall, it's like a lot of the Star Wars television series have been. It was mediocre at best for the most part. But when it was really good, it was really good. When there were really big moments, they were really big moments. But that doesn't save the overall show. They get all the wrong things right. I love that statement. I think that's true of a lot of the stuff we've kind of had shoveled our way in recent years.
Can I tell you something sad?
Go ahead.
This is the first of 2 Star Wars podcasts I'm going to be on today, and I have yet to watch an episode of Ahsoka.
I just have to. This is a serious question. It's on once a week. It is available streaming. Are you really, really that busy? You don't want to give it a shot yet, or what are you waiting to watch it for?
Me? No. What it is what had happened was I was in the middle. I started this a while back, and Steve knows this. I started finally watching through Clone Wars. And because when Clone Wars came out, I saw the movie at the theater. I paid. Took G-Man with me, little tiny G-Man, and and when the show came on, I think I watched the first couple episodes, and it just was kind of one of those things I just did not have time. Especially, I think when it first came on, it was on like Friday nights.
Yeah, it was on weird times.
9 or 10 o'clock on Friday night, right?
But during football season, I can't do that. I don't know if you're aware of that or not, Joe.
I am.
But
most Friday nights, yes.
Yeah,
and some Sundays, some Saturdays,
all Sundays,
some Wednesdays,
some Saturdays. Now Thursdays. But anyway, I bought all the Blu-rays. I just never got around to watching it all. And every so often I'd try to watch it, and I just never could sit with it. And then once I got that stationary bike and I could actually sit down and, pedal, which I knew I had to pedal, I could actually sit and watch some of the stuff. So I've been catching up and watching through. And it became kind of obvious as Ahsoka got on the horizon that I probably need to watch all of Clone Wars. And then I think Shaz or Steve or both suggested, hey, not only do you need to watch all of Clone Wars, but you need to watch through Rebels too. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay, great. There's another thing I got to do. So I am almost at the end of season 6 of Clone Wars. So when I finish that, I'll go to Rebels, and then I'll watch Ahsoka after that.
But I will say 7.
You
gotta watch season 7.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna finish Clone Wars. Is what I'm saying. I'm just very close to it. I just finished the story, the 2-parter with Jar Jar and his love.
Yeah.
Which I loved that because it was fun. It was Jar Jar being Jar Jar.
He was playing off. Mace Windu was in that one, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's the thing, is Jar Jar had a straight guy to play off of.
Yes.
Like his comedy had someone who played it straight laced to play.
You need
off
Qui-Gon with him. Yeah.
Which is something he didn't really get to have too much of in the Phantom Menace. Because when he played off of Qui-Gon, it was good. Right. But most of the time he was with Anakin after that, or by himself, just as kind of a side character on the screen making a joke.
Or with more Gungans. He was with
he was a lot of Gungans.
Yeah.
So when you're rewatching the Clone Wars, I do have to ask, every single episode, are you watching them in chronological order, or are you just watching them straight through?
Okay, you prefix re.
Okay.
I have
when you're watching the Clone Wars,
I'm watching every episode in episode, season, and number order. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So and I'm late stages of season 6, then I'll go straight to season 7, and then I'll hit Rebels, and then I'll be ready for Ahsoka.
Okay.
Not before then.
Season 6, that was the stuff that came to Netflix first.
That was the Netflix season, yeah.
Yoda with Darth Bane.
Yeah, I think there's still some George Lucas influence and all that stuff. Because I think it was leftover scripts and everything.
It was.
Seven's all
And
new.
the Yoda stuff at the end of the season is number one.
Well, good. I may watch that today on my bike ride.
And then season 7, was that mostly the Ahsoka stuff, Joe?
It was the Bad Batch for 4 episodes. It was
Okay.
Ahsoka with the Martez sisters for 4 episodes, and then I believe the
And the last 4 were like the episode 3
Mandalorian
thing.
Where it crossed over with Revenge of the Sith, which I think, man, I know somebody's done it. I haven't watched it. Somebody's layered those together.
Yeah.
I need to check that out.
Which, I would say, Scott, honestly, just watch those last 4 episodes of season 7. Like, save yourself. Unless you just feel like you're invested and you got to be a completist.
Well, come on now.
Have you seen his bookshelf behind him?
Come on now.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
Unless you just have to be a completist, I would just hit those last 4 episodes. But I'll tell you this as well: Rebels is going to feel like you're going to get whiplash with it, because Rebels immediately goes back to what the Clone Wars was in the early days, like trying to figure out the fullness of what it is. Yeah. It's got a little more of its identity figured out, but it still plays to kind of like it dumbs it down at first. It seems like for a more childlike audience. But I thought I really did. I thought going into Rebels, I just was not going to like it, and I ended up really, really enjoying the whole. I
watched the first season of that back in the day, and I think I got into the second season up until the Jaws episode. And but yeah, and I'll rewatch all of that because I don't have a great grasp of it. What I do remember is I remember liking the production design. Yep. Going really hardcore Macquarie, which they hadn't really done before. And the other thing I remember is how cheap I remember it looking, because it was like the same 3 people in the background all the time.
Yep, all the time.
That is I loved Clone Wars, but like most people, I didn't take it in initially. I took it in once it came to streaming, and then I was like, I never watched this. I really need to check it out. Loved it, but there was plenty of stinker mixed in with great. There was some things where you're like, oh, that was an interesting 22 minutes I just spent. But the good parts, like we talked about with the Disney series, the good parts were really good parts. The Satine storylines, a lot of Ahsoka storylines, things like that really got deep, really got interesting. And I think they finished well with that Mandalore. That was a fantastic ending for that series. But Rebels, like you mentioned, Steve, I went into that first season going, okay, in my mind, it was going to be Resistance before I knew what Resistance was. And then every season after kind of took it up.
Yeah, it really does
up every time.
It does a good job of ramping up during the season. And Scott, I know you hate Thrawn. And so you'll hate him when he spoiler alert, he shows up on Rebel.
I know he does. I don't hate Thrawn. I hate the over-reliance in the books on that stupid art gimmick.
Yeah.
Because it just is dumb.
I was thinking last night, I've been trying to finish up Better Call Saul.
Well, the animation gets a lot better in that one towards the end.
Better Call Saul?
Yeah.
Well, and of course I watched Breaking Bad when it was on, but I was thinking, Thrawn comes off too much as, and the Rebel Force Radio guys have made fun of this, like if something goes wrong, he's like, it's okay, it's all according to plan, and I'm like, what, Thrawn really should come off more as a Gustav Fring. And I don't know if you guys have watched Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, but Gus Fring is this unassuming guy who runs a chicken restaurant, like literally runs a fried chicken place. And he's very buttoned up, very neat. You would never think that he is, number one meth smuggler dealer, for the cartels in the world. And when he starts to plot and plan, it's terrifying. And it's never, oh, this has failed, that's okay, it all plays in our plan. It is, my plan is going to be what comes to fruition. No one is going to thwart my plans. And he's cold and he's calculating. And Thrawn doesn't have, and so you're scared of Gus throughout both of these shows. And that's what Thrawn needs to be, someone that you're actually scared of. And I never feel that fear of him.
Who puts together a plan, a vital part of which is failing 6 times?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is a weird thing. And guys, do they make it? Do they want to make it to where you don't feel like? I mean, when you feel like Vader walks in a room, 99 out of 100 times you feel like he's going to win, right?
And butt cheeks clench.
Yes.
Right.
So do they
Right.
say we want to make an enemy that's different than that?
Well, sure.
Or
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes. It's the idea of we can't have Vader look weak by losing to this band of rebels, week after week. Vader has, and the thing Rebels does well is when Vader shows up,
oh,
it's scary, and stuff has gotten real, and that's great and that's good. The problem is you never feel like the heroes are really backed into a corner until the very end of the series, when everything's kind of coming to fruition with Thrawn and all. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, because that in itself has lent to me when Thrawn showed, spoiler alert, though it was in trailers and everything, when Thrawn shows up in the Ahsoka series, I'm just not as scared of him as I should be, and because the characterization I think has been a little bit off. And I think especially when you go to live action, that he can have that kind of Gus Fring attitude about him.
So here's something that I will say. One of the things that I made comments about Ahsoka, and we're not going to get too deep in the story for you, Scott, so you don't have to worry about it, but it's more of a characterization thing. I thought they hit it out of the park with Sabine. I thought the Sabine character was a very good Sabine. I thought the Ezra played and seemed like a very good Ezra.
Yeah,
I thought he was better than Ezra.
I think
yes, it was
think
good living with you.
I was a little nervous whether or not Rosario Dawson could take the mantle from Ashley Eckstein, because again, when you pound out Clone Wars and you see her in Rebels, you start thinking that is Ahsoka, right?
Mhm.
But I would say she's done a fairly good job, and it's believable for her to be Ahsoka in this series. The one that we all discussed, and Scott, you'll see it soon enough, that the first two episodes we were like, whoa, this wasn't a hit, was Hera. I felt her look and how she portrayed her was not her. But by the end of the series, honestly, I was like, okay, she's transformed. She's better. This is Hera. But would you agree with any of those comments, Steve, since you've watched it through?
Hera, yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to translate characters from an animated type thing to live action, especially because one of the things that really throws me off is the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
The eyes on, because the characters are so stylized and they're animated characters, and they've got that kind of Disney big eye thing going on, in the series. To see normal eyes on these things, it was kind of, I had to realize that's what's really throwing me off,
right,
with a lot of these, just the look and feel. I didn't have a problem with some of the characterizations that a lot of people had in the way that the characters were portrayed early on, that I know a lot of people, because I did feel like obviously some people have gone through some stuff,
yes.
The problem is, and Scott, I'm really anxious for you to watch it, because I know that you have such a good mind for script writing and storytelling and everything, that you will be able to put into words better than I can the frustration of, you've had all this stuff happen and you keep it in the dark, and then when it's finally explained, it's really not that big a deal. It could have been handled way up front, and we as the audience could have been on this journey with these characters in a better way than we were.
Yeah.
And I think, and people don't want to hear that, and that's kind of the other thing that's kind of bothersome about this series, is that the people who want to love it and think it's great, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But the minute you offer any legitimate criticism, not saying it sucks or you hate it, but just saying, look, I think this would have been better. This characters would have been better suited. The story would have been better suited had this information been given at this point in time. People are like, well, you don't understand mystery storytelling. You got to keep suspense and mystery. Ben Kenobi
none of
mentioned,
the ultimate reveal is unfulfilling.
Right. That's the thing. It was something that could have easily been talked about in discussion early on. Sabine and Ahsoka have a little bit of a rift between them, and that's never fully explained or explored. until like the last episode of the series. And it's like, put up front what the problem is so we can understand their motivations and understand what a big deal it is for them to reconcile with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, we're along for that ride. And what people like to do, and look, since we're talking Star Wars, let's just go down this path. I am really over these fans, and this is going to sound like gatekeeping, but by God, someone should have kept the gate a long time ago.
Yeah, they should have.
I am really over these fans who have liked Star Wars for the past 10, 15 years, trying to take the original trilogy and crap on it to elevate the things that they think they love.
Yes, sir.
There is no Clone Wars. There is no Ahsoka. There is no Mandalorian. There is no Book of Boba Fett. There is no Force Awakens, Last Jedi, or Rise of Skywalker without Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. So what must happen amongst fandom is to put those stories in their proper reverential place, because they are the pinnacle of Star Wars.
Yep.
They are what everything spins out of. And if you try to get off page or off book from that too much, you end up like so many of these EU books used to end up, like so many of these different things. You just end up in this place. It's like, it's just not good because it's not Star Wars.
Right.
And you can discuss how you love something without crapping on the very foundation upon which these things are built. The House of Ahsoka is built on Star Wars, or A New Hope, as the newbies call it, you know. But it'll always be Star Wars, Empire, and Return of the Jedi to me. Like, you know, Star Wars was always Star Wars.
Yep.
You know.
Well, yeah, and you get that. I mean, you know, if we're gonna go there, let's go there. You get that in the Rey thing, where Rey just picks up a lightsaber and beats Kylo Ren in a fight, and you know, you get, well, Luke Skywalker just destroyed the Death Star in one day. Isn't that pretty stupid? Isn't it? It's like, no, it's actually explained in the film. You choose to ignore it, and you choose to be reductive,
Right.
because, you know, you're trying to make a point, but your point is to crap on the original instead of justifying the existence of what you have.
Right. Yeah. Listen, there's 3 important lines of dialogue to explain to you what Luke's doing in that trench and why he's able to do it. One, 4 important lines of dialogue. One, I understand you've become quite a pilot yourself. Boom. 2, you know what? We don't have to sit here and listen to this. I can fly this, you know. Well, who's going to get a ship, kid? You. Or who's going to pilot the ship, kid? You.
Bet I could.
3, it's just like bullseye.
Wait, back up.
Back up.
Oh, yep. I'm sorry.
Back up. There's another one.
Miss?
You know, I could feel something. I could almost see the remote.
Right.
Because he's learned to stretch out with his feelings.
Yeah. It's just it's like bullseyeing romp rats in my T-16 back home, you know.
Yep.
And then Big says, just like Beggar's Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so these are things that are familiar to Luke. Piloting is something he's used to, and add on to that, he's learning to use the Force. And Ben Kenobi is in his heart and mind and ear saying, let go, reach out, trust the Force.
He says let go. And you know where else he says let go?
When he's doing the training remote.
When he's doing the training remote, let go your conscious self and act on instinct. So he's evoking that moment when Luke was able to reach out through the Force.
Yeah.
So you guys have just brought up all those good lines, and I'm not here to crap on the sequels. Everybody knows they're not my favorite. They're Star Wars, and I will watch them. That's where they are. But you just brought up all these 5 or 6 lines and 5 or 6 reasonings as to why Luke could do what he did. Mm-hmm. But a lot of sequel fans are perfectly okay with Rey never being in the Millennium Falcon before and flying it, and Rey being able to do the things she's been able to do, but there's no one in her head. There's no one giving her the line saying, oh, have you flown this before? Oh, when did you train with this before? Or, oh, you know how to battle somebody with a lightsaber before. None of those are brought up one time in that movie at all.
We're supposed to infer from the fact that Rey is a junker that she understands the workings of a starship and is able to pilot one. And she has a little bit of a rough go at it at first with the Falcon when they're getting away from the TIE fighters and everything. She is competent in hand-to-hand combat, as we see when she takes her, you know, her
staff.
rod and her staff and knocks down some folks. But to master a lightsaber against a bigger, stronger foe who is able to use the Force and control the Force, yeah, she should have been dead. Kylo Ren was toying with both of them, and truthfully, yeah, there's an earthquake that kind of breaks the two of them apart, so she can get away. But there was a lot I just accepted in that thing, thinking, well, it'll get better, and then it didn't, and again, go back to what I said earlier. It's that trend of, here's our heroes that you love. Look how terrible they are.
Mm-hmm.
They've just made a mess of everything
to save them.
Have you guys seen the TikTok about the guy who walks into the boardroom talking about the original trilogy characters?
No.
Oh gosh, Alfie sent it to me. I'm going to forward it to you. It's hilarious. Guy walks in, goes, "What do you love? What do you love? Kill it. What do you love? You like this? Kill that." And he just starts yelling at the board and everything else. I'm going to shut my door because my dogs are barking. You guys keep going. 1 second.
Great. It's our show now, Scott.
That's good. That's the way I've needed it to be anyway.
We've talked Superman. We've talked cartoons. What?
I have this nutty idea for. I sent you that thing the other day that I have a nutty idea for a new podcast.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I should reveal it here or not, but I don't know that I'll actually do it. That's true. I don't know that I'll actually do it, but the premise, I bounced off Ryan the other day, and Ryan liked it. So I figured if Ryan liked it. Ryan loves a good podcast.
Yeah.
No, Ryan's got a very good ear for podcasts, though. I get probably because he listens to so many of them, but he's got a good ear for good premises and good podcasts. Here's my premise for a podcast. I would call it audiobooks they'll never make. And I started this because I'm trying to remember exactly where the idea came from, but I was looking at, the idea came from originally when Heart of the Jedi came out. I want to record that, and I still want to record that. I still want to put that out chapter by chapter. Heart of the Jedi. You remember Heart of the Jedi, right?
I don't
Steve Frozen, or is he frozen? Heart of the Jedi is that novel that Del Rey contracted during the early days of the Star Wars publishing revival.
They made it but didn't make it, right?
And never published it.
Yeah.
Kenneth C. Flint.
Yeah. And somebody commissioned a cover and released it on Amazon on like a publish on demand type thing. And it got yanked pretty quickly, but not before several people snatched up copies. I got my hands on too. So because I wasn't going to take a chance because I knew it was going to get yanked. But when that first came out, I thought, well, there'll never be an audiobook of that, and I should do an audiobook for it. And started working on it, but just kind of fell off of it. And then I was thinking, we did that Indiana trip, and on our way to the airport, we had about 2 hours to kill, so we stopped by a half-price books. And at the half-price books, I found a copy of the novelization, and you know how I am about novelizations, the novelization of the Pink Panther, the Return of the Pink Panther.
Wow.
Which is the one with Christopher Plummer taking over David Niven's role as the Phantom, Sir Charles Lytton. And I thought, that's another one that they will never, ever, ever make an audiobook of, because why would they? And then I was sitting in the room, and all that was still in my head. I was sitting in the office, and somehow my eyes fell upon this.
Oh, not again.
The Howard the Duck novelization.
Yes.
And I was like, they'll never make an audiobook of that. And it kind of clicked with me. Well, if they don't, somebody should.
Yeah.
And so I thought, you do a podcast where you record, you release a chapter of a book every day of some book that they've never, and basically you don't do it for a profit. And if they tell you to yank it, you yank it.
Yeah.
No harm, no foul. But I just thought, there's a bunch of these books out there that people are nerdy about that they love.
Scott,
that'll never be audiobooks.
Scott, how long is a chapter of the Howard the Duck novelization?
The first chapter is like 15 pages.
You could sit down in an evening and read a chapter, record it, and just be done, and do it, and don't even do it daily. Do it weekly. Like,
I agree. I want to hear it now. I need voices though.
Well, the thing about it, the first chapter is like a voice of God character in there, so I'd have to put a little echo to it. So it would take a little bit of production value to it, but not.
But you don't. I mean, most audiobooks, there's a little bit of production there, maybe a little original music to kind of start the thing out. But by and large, it's just the reader sitting there reading you the story and doing voices like your parents used to when they'd read you books.
Yes,
and you could do that.
Yeah,
That's
it's just a
all
matter of
you.
time.
You don't need any help.
No, just time. I didn't ask for help.
I'm just saying, I couldn't do that. I don't have the voice to do it.
Actually, there was should I even talk about this?
We've got time, so
did I
if you wanna
even talk about
it? Yeah.
This is the most time I've ever been on a Rule the Galaxy show.
Wow.
Joey Marinara is like, he is loving his life right now. This is the
Yeah, I
most
don't
laid
know.
back I've ever seen him do anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to be relaxed, Steve. Trying to be relaxed.
All right.
That
All right.
chair is swiveling a little bit more and more as the time goes on, though.
All right. I'll talk about it. I got approached. This is another thing I think that kicked that idea into gear. I got approached a couple of weeks ago by a guy.
This is getting dark right now. I'm just saying.
It wasn't like in an alley or anything.
What time of day was it?
A bathroom anywhere, public restroom, or
under the pier,
Park or anything.
Under the pier, yeah.
But no, we're Massengale Park here, Steve. You should know that by now.
Oh Lord, not Massengale.
Yes, but I got approached by a guy. It was on Friday night while we were doing a football game, and he sent me a Facebook Messenger note, and I don't know that I should say his name because he actually is somebody who has done some things.
No, just go on.
And I looked
at the guy.
Anyway, he was like, I love Star Wars. I've always loved Star Wars. I have done some things in the Star Wars field, we'll say, and I thought it would be a neat idea to start a podcast where people talk about.
This is the guy that stole your story, willing to steal your podcast idea. Yeah, you told me about this.
He told me. Well, he suggested first that could he be a guest on it, and I was thinking, sure, because he found my Star Wars stories, what the deal was, and he wondered if I was going to be doing any more of them because I haven't done one in maybe 2 years. And so his first question was, could I be a guest? His second question was, could I be your co-host? His third question was, could I take it over and
wow,
if I make any money off of it, give you a little bit of it? And which was a little forward, I thought.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, you don't fault somebody for asking, but it's like, hey, can I take this thing away from you that you slaved over? And the weird thing was that Steve and I had some conversations about how to move forward with my Star Wars story. And I think I like the conversations that we had. I think I like the direction that I think I'm going to go with it, and it will come back just at some point. We'll see. I do have plans. I told him I do have plans for it. Yes. And I appreciate your asking. And I would love to have you on as a guest sometime because he does have some real honest to goodness Star Wars credentials. I'll just say his bona fides, if you will. Nice. And so he would be an interesting guest, but then he never responded again other than, okay, thanks. And so I don't know that his desire to be a guest was actually a desire to be a guest.
Yeah, he was not concerned with being a guest. Yeah.
No. He wanted to take over the show.
Yeah. So again, that's as much of the story as I will tell. But yeah, it was a little off-putting to have somebody just come to you and go, hey, this thing that you really put so much of yourself into, I'd like to snatch it away from you if you don't mind. Now, and the weird thing is, it's like I don't own the concept.
Right. No. Can name it a different name.
Logo.
But now put yourself in a position where you're dealing with some stuff in life. You've stepped away from podcasting. You don't know when you're going to get back to it, if you do, because you've got to figure life out. You're at a crossroads, and you get an email that says, hey, why don't we would love to buy Geek Out Loud from you.
Did you get one of those?
Yeah, man.
Did you really?
I did.
Take the money and run.
How much did they offer?
They didn't offer anything. I didn't get into talks with them. They were it wasn't even buy. Let me say this. It was in the early days of podcasting. So it wasn't, we'll buy it from you. It was like, we'd like to do this show. Could we have this show?
Can we have this show?
Yeah. And I was like, no, I don't think so. Thanks though. Thanks for your interest and your compassion.
Well, Geek Out Loud was, it was always on the front page back in the day. It was always on the front page of the Apple podcast thing.
It was always... because there was a boom of reviews and ratings left, and so I would stay completely up there because there weren't celebrities and
everybody from every show that's ever been canceled doesn't do a podcast about the show and rewatch show and
now, but also there weren't consultants emailing you saying, hey, we can do this, let's get you hooked up with this person, Like it has literally become radio consultant goobland out in podcasting, because you have all these different media groups that have sprung up and want to help you make your podcast a success.
And that's a shame, because that was part of the charm of podcasting to me.
Yeah. Well, that's why I haven't done that with anybody. You know, like I've not responded to any of these emails. Like, we can get you hooked up with this interview or that interview. Your podcast would be great for this person. And what I want to email them back and say, sorry, Joe, is listen, I'm a conservative white Christian male. Do you still have the perfect guest for my show?
Oops. Darn.
Wow.
Because it was going to be how bad Trump is going to be for geekdom. So
That's
no,
right.
I'm sorry we don't have that
That's
for
right.
Man, well, it was nice having a podcast. Yeah, that's a fun. Myself, D-Doc, Alfie, Brent, we sit and we talk about topics related to our show and what we're gonna do, and we just sit there and go, you know what? It's just gonna be 4 or 5 guys sitting around talking Star Wars. That's pretty much it. And if we get 10 people listening, or if we get 1,000 people listening, that's what it's gonna be. And you know,
and you want to do what you want to do. What's going to entertain you. You want to do what's going to be fun for you.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things I will tell you, for a second there, I thought, well, maybe I bring this guy in as a partner because he can help me get some of the stuff done. And I did that thing that I do when I hire people for work. And I went and checked out the Twitter feed, checked out the social media footprint. And what I saw on the social media footprint was, and I hate that Steve's occupied right now, because I think this is a part of the discussion he could contribute to. So maybe I should hold off a bit.
Well, I'll tell you what, while he's busy with that, and while we put a pause on that, I will say Brent, regular co-host here with me on Rule the Galaxy.
Yeah.
He and I in September, we hosted trivia night as you usually do, Scott. We did that here on the south side of Indy. We had a great time. We have another one coming up next week, so we're really excited. So we are scheduled to do once a month: September, October, November, December.
Oh, cool!
It's been good. Brent and I learned a lot from the first time, and we're excited to do this for the once a month for the rest of the year. It's going to be interesting to see where that goes. But anyway, we were filling the gap while you were away there, Mr. Glosson. So go ahead, Mr. Ryfun.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I had given this guy, I was going to give this guy a little consideration, and maybe you bring him on as a partner, get some things done, because I don't sometimes have time to do everything and get it all done. Part of my issue. And I said, maybe that's the thing. And I did that thing I do when I hire people. I checked out a social media footprint, and what I saw was we'll just say a lot of the over reliance on identity. How's that? As a topic of interest and fixation and discussion.
Yeah.
And look, I've already had my Star Wars story ripped off from me once. By Lucasfilm. And yes. And Jordan Hembrough, who I'm sure is a very nice man, but he was very well aware of the podcast, because he'd been approached to be on it early in the podcast. I had somebody who was a guest on the podcast who was working for Lucasfilm at the time they launched their Our Star Wars Stories feature. And they never did a second season of Our Star Wars Stories. And I think part of it is, I think it was a fail. And the reason I think it was a fail was because it was less about people's personal stories with regards to the material and more about identity. It was more about, put me in this box and check this box, and then put me in this box and check this box. And it wasn't really about people's love and passion for Star Wars. It was they put a Star Wars mask on people's identity politics stories. And so I think it was a bit of a fail. And I think if I had brought in this other guy as a partner, it would have become that. And I didn't want it to be that. I don't want it to be that.
Also, being that show being a podcast that was, sanctioned and everything by Lucasfilm, I imagine there would have been things they wanted to focus on, with each story. Like, tell us how much you love the Clone Wars. Tell us how much you love, the future of what Star Wars is going to be.
And by the way, we're about to introduce a new line in this series. Maybe you perhaps love this.
Right. Yep. So
yes, I do, especially if I get it for free.
But see, that's that corporate consulting thing that kind of goes on and has kind of invaded this space. And it's happened with YouTube, Joe. I'm sure you guys know it, that you get the emails of like, you need to be making shorts. Hey, here's a suggestion, make a second channel, for this, that, or the other. And you have all these big quote unquote influencers doing that on YouTube because they already have 1 million subscribers or hundreds of thousands. And so they're going to be able to make a little extra money doing that and everything. Whereas if you're not making a dime, it doesn't matter. If the algorithm's not going to catch you and put you out there in front of everybody, what does that? And listen, if you've got Steve Glosson and Scott Ryfun on your show, the algorithm is not going to pick you up and and carry you through.
Well, really, this podcast is just really here to entertain me. So it's fine. If I'm the one listener, we're good because I'm entertained. You guys make me laugh, and that's good.
But what's funny is, and one of the things that I always appreciate, and I've told you this 1,000 times, in a world that claims to treasure and present diversity, overwhelmingly people who claim and talk about diversity as a virtue don't actually present diversity and don't have any real interest in actually presenting diversity. They have a small subset of people that they call diverse, and they show you the same subset of people over and over again.
Right.
This program actually does have diversity. This program actually does have people of different backgrounds, different faiths, different political beliefs, different genders, different, you have all of that. And you don't make a gigantic deal out of it.
And we'd have more if more people would agree to come on and give it a whirl. I mean, I've offered anybody and everybody under the sun, hey, come on and talk about your thoughts, your views, everything like that. And some people have, others have said, no thanks. And I'm just going to hop away from that real quick onto this. Steve, you had mentioned that you had some interaction with Vanessa Marshall in the past. I think you and Teresa maybe had interaction with her. And I know our friend Adam Bray had some interaction with her. I had her on the show. She was, not only was she dealing with a fire in her neighborhood at the time she was on our show, which was
good grief.
Yeah. She paused, went away, answered a phone call, hopped back on, said there's a fire, but it's not close to my house, so I don't have to leave. So yeah, she was dealing with that. But when I brought up everybody's name and said, hey, I would feel bad. I'd feel remiss if I didn't bring up Steve and Teresa and Adam. And she, nice as can be. She's just like, thank you. I remember they're sweet people. And I tell you, you had mentioned she was like a great ambassador for Star Wars right now. And she just, you want to talk about a person who had no agenda, right? Like she came on and I couldn't tell you what she believes, what she doesn't believe, except that she's a nice person.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so going off of what Scott was saying about how we try to bring everybody in, I would love to have more people like that, where I just say, hey, go and talk about what you want to talk about. And every now and then we'll ask you a question related to Star Wars. Right.
Yep.
And it was one of the best things we ever did to have her on. And we're open to that. I mean, Scott and I, we've talked about the first Hokairo, right? Hokairo, man, that guy he's a wild man, but I love it. I love how wild he is. And he comes on and I'll let him rant for an hour. Go. Just talk about what you want to talk about.
I listened to him on your program. I listened to him on there, and I don't agree with half the stuff he says, but I'm fascinated by what he said, and I'm interested in what he said. And I think, that's a guy that I appreciate. Because he is willing to go different places and talk about, what he buys into, what he believes in, wants to share what is kind of up in his head. And yeah, I love the guy and I love hearing him, but and you can actually like and enjoy and appreciate people who are not exactly identical to you. It's amazing.
Well, with you guys being from the South, you guys know of Bobby Hebert, probably the quarterback who was with the Saints and the Falcons, I believe. His son, T-Bob, has come on our show 5 or 6 times. You want to talk about a fanatic for the sequel trilogy. This man, he'll die on that hill, right? And I'm going to have him on soon to talk about Ahsoka, and I want to see how he correlates it back to the sequel trilogy, because he loves it. But we love that. T-Bob is a wild man animal, and he comes on, and I just let him rant, and I love every minute of it. And he's a great friend of my son. He's a good friend of the show. But I think that's one of the things that I get the most kick out of is hearing those guys just go down those tangents. Steve, you always talk about taking this off the rails and everything, but there's plenty of people who do that on our show, not just you. But it's that is what's entertaining to me about all this, is that we just have fun and let people be who they are. So,
well, speaking of T-Bob, let me just swing this back around. In the cartoon Mask, you had not only all of the characters that you could find on the shelves and everything, but like many cartoons of the day, they always tried to throw in some extra characters that would be just there for fun.
sure.
So Matt Tracker, the leader of Mask, had a son, and his son had a little robot buddy that turned into a scooter that he'd ride around on, and his name was T-Bob.
Oh,
short
man.
for
No.
T-Bob. Yep.
That cannot be.
It's a true story.
I'm going to pull that up and send that to him. Just I'm going to say,
Is
here's what
that
you were
where he
named
gets
after.
it from?
No, his name is also Bobby A. Bear, but
Sure.
because he doesn't want to be, the son of Bobby A. Bear to be Bobby A. Bear, somehow, some way, and I forget the story. He goes by T-Bob. I'll have to check with him again next time he's on the show. We'll get it knocked out on that. But yes, I'm sure there's something correlating to, hey, I'm my own guy. I'm not Bobby A. Bear. I'm T-Bob. So maybe their name is like Thomas Robert A. Bear, and that's why he goes by. I will find out. T-Bob. But okay. I did have a question for both of you guys.
Okay.
So we've talked about a lot of animation, Saturday morning cartoons, all that kind of stuff, which I think we were all better for growing up with Saturday morning cartoons and making that a special kind of event for all of us. But looking at Star Wars itself, is there a cartoon, an animated story that you want to see coming out of Star Wars in the near future?
You mean like an adaptation of something already made, or
no? I mean, it could be the next Clone Wars, the next Rebels. It could be an adaptation of something that's already out there, whatever. But what would be your, I guess, fantasy storyline that you'd say, I would love to see an animated storyline of this that either connects something or it's in between something or what have you?
Steven?
I don't know. I know that there have been a lot of people who've clamored for like animate the original Thrawn trilogy or animate.
Yes, and that's
Dark
where
Empire.
I thought maybe this was going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, all of those would be outside of continuity nowadays. You know what I mean? I think given things like Star Wars Visionaries or whatever they call it, where they're doing like the
Anime?
Yeah, the anime stuff and everything. I think that there's a look, and I don't want to step on anything Scott would have to do or say here, but I think there's a great opportunity to do some animated versions of the Marvel Comics stuff out there.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and I'll let Scott speak to particular story arcs that he might like to see that done with.
I let you go first, and what do you do to me?
Yeah.
What do you do to me? Yeah, that's actually what I'd love to see done. And heck with the fact that they've already bridged all that stuff in the regular, the new Marvel comics. I'd like for them to go back, and I'd like for them to go to that water world. I'd like for them to have Crimson Jack steal. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about it, is they were conscious of everything that they had. Maybe more so than we understood at the time. Solo gets away with his reward, and we've got to have Solo be desperate and broke, because it's not fun when he's got a lot of money. So Crimson Jack steals his treasure, steals his reward. So now Solo's broke and desperate for money again, puts him in a great position. The Crimson Jack story unfolds in a very interesting way. Then, of course, the wheel. You know the wheel because you make fun of me saying the wheel all the time. The wheel story is fantastic. But before that, you've got Valance the Hunter you introduced. That whole saga. You've got the whole Taggy family drama that they've reintroduced a lot of these characters, including Crimson Jack, which they introduced him in the Halcyon Cruiser miniseries or whatever it was called. For the what's the name of the hotel they closed? They did close it. It's October now.
It was just the Galactic Cruiser, wasn't it?
Yeah, Galactic Star Cruiser. Yeah, but it was the Halcyon. Yeah, but they did a miniseries about it, and Crimson Jack showed up in the miniseries. So they've put him in continuity, but not. They brought a lot of these characters in, including Domina Taggy, who was a great character, but they didn't bring her back the way she was. Yeah. She was Michael Corleone. She was the innocent who they tried to keep away from the family business, who wound up being the mastermind of the family business.
Love it.
In the current comics, she's just an evil, mean, conniving, person who was always evil, mean, and conniving, and that's not interesting and exciting to me. It's that fall that I think is interesting. Mm-hmm. It's they literally put her away on a monastery on a planet called Monastery. They had it. They were so committed to the idea of her being in a monastery, and from there she becomes the manipulative leader of the family, essentially. That's interesting stuff. I would like to see that story told that way. And then from there, the post-Empire stuff, where they go the planet of the Hujubs, as the book and record had. Pliff was the name of the issue, number 55, where Lando goes back to Cloud City right after that, and has to deal with a malfunctioning Lobot, and that whole thing, that whole storyline, and then they're going after Solo being frozen, running into Finn Shiza. I mean, that there's just a slew of great stories that could be adapted and even tweaked a little bit to make them a little more continuity friendly, but in the overall, yeah, I would love to see adaptations of that stuff.
You could, and my thing is, I want to see it in 2D animation, not 3D animation. I think that'd be kind of the fun way to go with it.
For me, I'd like to see it done in the style of the artist who drew it. I'd like to see an Infantino looking Star Wars doing Infantino stories.
For sure.
Wow.
Balance the Hunter. Balance. Go ahead.
Well, I think you could also get a lot of mileage out of an animated series that's kind of like a Tales from Jabba's Palace or a Tales of the Mos Eisley Cantina kind of thing, because there was so much scum and villainy there. You could show just a lot of bounty hunter type adventures. You could show a lot of different things, and do some shorts if they want to stick to kind of the short format that they did with, like, what'd they call it? The Tales of the Jedi that they put out on Disney Plus last year. Yep. That was like, that had some prequel era stuff in it and everything. I think that you could do that and have a lot of fun with some of those characters that, are just, look, an episode focused on Yak Face, so there's finally a reason to own the action figure, like that. I think you could have some fun with that kind of stuff. Greedo, before he wound up in, sizzling on the table at the Mos Eisley Cantina.
And this is the stuff that West End Games used to do before.
Yeah.
This is where we got a lot of that stuff. The only thing I would say, and I like the idea, the only thing I would say is, don't give me everything about everybody, because that kind of drives me nuts when they tell me, and as much as I love Jeffrey Boehm, at the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, we find out in 10 minutes where he got the fear of snakes, the scar, the bullwhip, and the fedora.
But in '89, that was cool, man.
Oh, well, no, cool. And I love it. I love that movie. Don't get me wrong, and I love that screenplay. But it's nice to have that kind of neat thing for a character like Indiana Jones. But I don't want every detail of every background character, because I want some of their canvases to be blank so that I can put what I want on them.
Sure. I think that you could do it.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think you could do it like very short form. The micro series, the Clone Wars micro series that Tartakovsky did. The second or third season, I guess, is what they actually called it, where it was the whole Battle of Coruscant leading literally right into Revenge of the Sith. You had them trying to protect Palpatine. You had these Jedi, and you don't know to this day who these Jedi were, but there was an Ithorian Jedi there. There was a Tall's Jedi there. And the Ithorian turns around and faces like the droids and stuff that are chasing him down, and just lets out this bellow. And Luminara and Julie looks and says, "Four throats." And they just go on with the thing. Like, there's no dialogue. You don't know who these characters are. You don't know where and you don't need to. And so that's where I say, I don't think, you necessarily need the Yak Face backstory, but just a 15-minute cartoon of him, doing something, and then walking into Jabba's palace with the find or with the, whatever job he's been out on, that kind of thing. And you don't have to be like, I was born a young yak face, I was born a poor black boy, or you don't have to do the whole jerk backstory and everything. You just, here he is in a ship that you've designed for him to be in, and coming back from something, that kind of thing. Like, and you kind of get to see those kind of people. Effin Mon, they said that he was this weird character in the background, and so of course the backstory that's made for him is he's like a weapons dealer. Show him dealing some arms, show him doing some shady deals and having to get away from stormtroopers of all things. Like, they're these underworld people are still outside of the law as it pertains to the Empire. So you still can have the Empire being the bad guys with these folks, and they can still be bad guys, and you can still be kind of rooting for them.
That reminds me also, another thing I would like to see it taken on as an animated project, or as a book project, or as a comic project, or as a multimedia transmedia project, as they now say. It used to be multimedia, now it's transmedia. Because that trans became the hip thing. And it's the Star Wars Underworld series. We know there are scripts. We're told there are scripts stockpiled. Don't let those go to waste. Let's see them put out there in some way, shape, fashion, form, something.
I kind of got the sense that some of that was done, or they took some ideas and stuff from that for the
1313.
For the first couple of episodes of like Mandalorian and stuff, like some of the concepts and all, and then of course by the time you get to the end of the first episode, that whole what your thought of that whole show, or my thought of what that whole show is about to be, changed, because like I can watch this guy go on adventures every week, taking down some targets. That'll be fun. And I really did think, and then when he opens up that pram and there's Baby Yoda, I'm like, oh, this just got real. That was the last fun Star Wars surprise I think that we'll ever have. I don't know.
Well, I think Luke showing up was probably a tremendous fun Star Wars surprise.
But, that was great.
But maybe those may be the two pinnacles of Disney Star Wars. And the other thing that did to me was it justified Disney, because remember at the time the binge was the model. And people were kind of perturbed that they weren't binging Mando. They were putting it out weekly.
Yeah.
And it was the 100% right thing to do, because you open up that pram at the end and you see little Baby Yoda, who we all automatically named that right after the episode. And that turned that show into what TV used to be, which was you show up at work the next day and you talk about what you saw last night.
Yep.
100%.
Yeah.
And TV used to be that thing, and then it went away from being that thing, and then all of a sudden, so we had time to talk about that and buzz about it, and hey, you better check this out before next week.
Right.
It was 100% the right thing to do, to not do a binge model on that, because otherwise, oh yeah, did you see the Baby Yoda thing? It was pretty cool, and then it wound up like this. Cute. All right, move on.
Yep.
Well, as Steve said, we've gone 2 hours. This is the longest we've ever done a Rule the Galaxy. And I'm being hailed to say it's time to start moving again. I'm moving houses.
That's what you've been doing. You've been getting out of the moving duties. I see. Yeah.
So
you've been letting other people do the work for you.
No, I would never do that. I'm all about the work, Steve.
Oh, I would. I've got this important discussion I've got to have.
Well,
what is it about? Cartoons and Star Wars?
I might break this up into 2 episodes and have them do a cartoon hour and a Star Wars hour, because people are going to be like, wait a minute, you were just talking Saturday morning cartoons for an hour, and now we're going deep into this. Well, that's all right.
Welcome to Geek Out Loud.
Yeah.
Welcome to Geek Out Loud.
Welcome to any conversation between us.
Yeah.
Right.
Guys, look, I told Scott beforehand, just a lot of changes going on at the Molinaro household. So with me not being on the show as much as usual, the guys have been great, been taking care of things while I've been kind of putting some things in order in the Molinaro household. But having you two that I can just reach out to and take the time to sit here and laugh and have great conversations, and not have to think about the real world for like 2 hours is fantastic. So thank you for being my therapist for this week and letting me just sink into fun times from the 70s, 80s through to today. So I really appreciate you guys both. Any closing thoughts from either one of you guys?
You want us to help you move?
If you want to visit Indiana,
Because
you're more than welcome.
we can't. So I was just making the offer to seem nice.
Daggone you, Scott. No, but thanks so much. And Steve, thanks for giving Joey Marinera the shout outs on Geek Out Loud, because I'm sitting there listening, not expecting to hear my name, and all of a sudden I'm like, hey, wait, my dogs are being mentioned in Geek Out Loud, and oh gosh, yeah, oh, I forgot I jinxed Geek Out Loud and it went off the air again for a few weeks because I talked about it.
Yeah, that was all your fault. I told you, don't say such a thing.
But you guys are the best. I can't wait to meet back up and talk once Scott finishes up with Clone Wars, Rebels, and Ahsoka. We can all sit down and hash that all out completely. But thanks so much for coming and being a part of what we do and letting the guys take a week off while I take a break from moving. So thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Love being offered the opportunity to come out here and chat with you guys.
And I will get Mark Newbold on with you soon, Scott, so you guys can talk Marvel
right,
comics.
Right.
Guys, be great. You always are. Thanks for always being a part of what we do. For all of our fans of Rule of the Galaxy, thanks so much for listening. Hopefully you will enjoy this show because it's multi-tangent in this episode right here. We cover a lot of stuff.
Something for everybody. Something for everyone. Yeah.
That's right. So thanks again. Until next week, when me or one of the other guys will be hosting, may the Force be with you.